is SLAYsmr, an ASMR channel where every week I talk about a different horror movie that I love. And this week's film is 1990's Nightbreed, written and directed by Clive Barker, based on his novella, Cabal. It's funny because I can't remember if I think it was the first episode I did. I talked about Nightbreed being the first horror movie that I remember seeing as a kid. And then I realized later on which Creature from the Black Lagoon, which we did an episode on. But I feel like Nightbreed is the one I maybe come back to more, and maybe the one that lines up a little bit more with my sensibilities as I've gotten older and started writing horror myself, and just starting to examine what I liked about the genre. I love Creature from the Black Lagoon, but even though Nightbreed wasn't technically the first horror movie I saw, I think it sometimes feels that way because of its style, its theme, just everything about it, which we'll of course talk about today. I actually saw an approximation of Nightbreed about when it came out. I was 6 years old in 1990, and I was living in McConnellsburg, Pennsylvania, which is kind of a rural, mountainy part of Pennsylvania. And my dad was watching it a lot. He was kind of obsessed with the movie. He had the Nightbreed comic books. He even had this book called The Nightbreed Chronicles that gave backstories about all the different monsters you see in the movie. Pretty cool. I think he still has it. And I was looking on Amazon, and it goes for like $154 for a used copy of it. So I don't think I'll ever sell it, but be good if you wanted to, if times get lean. But yeah, so I was seeing a lot of this stuff pop up around the house. The Nightbreed Chronicles, the VHS copy. I even saw a poster of it at the store, I think, which is funny because this movie did not do very well when it came out at all. It's since gone on to have a cult reputation, which once again we'll talk about in a little bit. So I remember seeing flashes of this really surreal and crazy looking monster movie that my dad was watching, and I asked him about it, and he told me the central plot. When I was a kid, it's funny because we live in such a spoiler phobic society, I think, sometimes when it comes to films, but when I was a kid, I used to love hearing about the plot of scary movies that movies that I wasn't allowed to see yet. I would kind of grill my dad, I think, about plot details and kind of find out everything I could about the movie before I watched it. Anyway, so I asked him about Nightbreed. He gave me the general plot, which is a troubled man named Aaron Boone is having these tortured nightmares of a place called Midian, which is an underground sanctuary where monsters go. They're banished from society, and they get to go there, and it's sort of a place where they won't get persecuted for being different, or in some cases for the crimes they've committed. Boone is under the guidance of a psychiatrist named Dr. Decker, who himself is actually very tortured and has been killing families around Canada. I think the movie's in Calgary. Yeah, the book too. I think they both take place in Calgary, Canada. I don't know what province that's in or anything. Any Canadians out there, feel free to educate me on the geography of Canada. But so what Decker does is he starts gaslighting Boone and making Boone think that he's the one who's been committing these crimes, which eventually leads to Boone getting wrongfully killed by the Decker and the police, and he gets resurrected and goes to Midian, the place where the monsters go, and becomes their champion. And the whole thesis of the movie is kind of the idea that humans are the real monster, right? The thing I love about this movie, that I've always loved about this movie, is that the monsters are just kind of cool. They're actually not that scary. I don't think they're grotesque a little bit, but the monsters we meet are almost like out of a surrealistic painting. They're like superheroes. The really scary person is Dr. Decker, who you can see up there. He's wearing this, they call him button face. It's a really creepy mask he wears when he kills people. It's almost like burlap with a zipper mouth and buttons on the eyes. It's super freaky. So anyway, I think I mentioned this before, but my dad made me like a monsters only cut of the movie, which essentially took out all the nudity. It took out all of the, not all of the violence, but some of Decker's violence, the more disturbing violence. And it was enough of a movie to give me a general idea of what it was about. And it's funny because going back to this idea of humans being the monsters in this movie, when I was a kid, the parts that were really hard for me to watch were the parts with Decker, the parts where we see Decker killing people and killing families, and David Cronenberg plays him, and it's just super creepy. I was never scared at all by the monster stuff, and I think that's the point of it, right? And that was my introduction to David Cronenberg. I don't think at that point I wouldn't have seen any of his movies. I don't think I saw a Cronenberg movie until later on, probably. Oh gosh, it had to have been The Dead Zone or The Fly. It was probably my first Cronenberg. But yeah, I was introduced to him first as an actor, and I think he's really good in this movie. He's not very realistic. He almost just reads everything really icily, really detached, which works, I think, super well for that character. It's just completely clinical. And as the movie goes on, you find out that I think Decker is disgusted with his own humanity. And in a way, I think the monsters in Boone are kind of aspirational, but he doesn't know how to embody aspiration. He only knows how to kill and to extinguish. And so I think him being detached is a true embodiment of him trying to detach himself from humanity. That's just my take on it. Anyway, as I got older, I eventually saw all of Nightbreed. And it's funny because I've always liked the movie. All versions of it. There's like 4 versions of it at this point, but in Hollywood lore, it was always said that the reason the movie didn't do well was because Clive Barker had this amazing 2.5 hour cut of it, and the studio wanted him to trim it, and so it weirdly had less monsters in it and became less about the stuff he wanted it to be about. And so a lot of people I know who loved the movie always thought that it felt unfinished or rushed. And then eventually, of course, it comes out that all this footage is still there, and they put together something called the Cabal cut a while back that's closer to Clive Barker's original vision, and also the novella that inspired it, including the ending, and which got altered, and just more monster stuff. It's funny because I've seen all the cuts, and I actually like the pacing of the original theatrical version a lot better than the Cabal cut. I think the Cabal cut does get a little soggy and weighs down in certain places. They go a lot more into Boone's backstory with his girlfriend, Lori, which once again is in the book, but it's at the front end of the movie, and so the performances, in my opinion, by Ann Bobby and Greg Sheffer as Lori and Boone are so good that I fill in the blanks myself. I believe that they love each other because they're good actors in it, and I think that they love each other on screen. I don't need a bunch of biographical details filled in, which is more what the Cabal cut does for them. You see them, Lori's life as a nightclub singer, you see Boone's life as a mechanic. It's not bad necessarily, but it's at the front of the movie, and I think I said this before, I'm all about starting scary movies with a jolt, having something really juicy up at the front, so it can set the tone and we know what's coming. And I think some of the more mundane details take away from that. That being said, I love all of the monster stuff that gets added back into the Cabal cut, so I think there's like a perfect version existing somewhere between the theatrical cut and the Cabal cut. They're both great. I love them for different reasons, but I feel like you could hit that sweet spot a little bit better with some editing and expansion, contraction, all that good stuff. So I mentioned mentioned starting the movie with a jolt. I will say the movie has one of the best opening credit sequences, in my opinion, of any horror movie. You get the title kind of scrolling past the screen, Nightbreed, in these big blocky letters, and in the letters are it's just footage of the monsters, and they're not even it's not even footage from the rest of the movie. It almost looks like B-roll that they took of Midian. You see Peliquin is one of the monsters laying down and covering himself in snakes. You see Shunasasi, who is the best way I can describe her is a porcupine woman. You see her kind of thrashing around. You see all sorts of cool stuff, so that immediately is great. And then the camera kind of pans across these cave drawings in Midian that prophesizes what's going to happen in the movie. And it's got a great score by Danny Elfman, the soundtrack is right behind me. It's funny because I feel like Danny Elfman gets remembered for Edward Scissorhands and Batman and all these Tim Burton movies and whatnot, and those are great. Those are truly iconic scores, but my favorite score, I think, is gotta be Nightbreed. There's the main theme, I guess it's marimbas or xylophone or something, but it's just this, once again, it's hard to replicate melody when I'm whispering, but it's like, dun, 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 dun. It's almost this soothing lullaby theme. Like I said, played on some kind of marimba or maybe a wooden xylophone. And I think it plays into this idea of the monsters not necessarily being scary, it's almost soothing. It paints Midian as a place that maybe is nice to be if you're an outcast in society. And later on, as we get further into the more horrific parts of the movie, we get a more classic Danny Elfman score, like a kid's choir that sounds more akin to a Burton movie. I feel like we should talk about the monsters in this movie. That's where the money's at for me. I love the monsters in this. Cronenberg's great. The humans are great as well, but man, there are some monsters in this movie that are unlike anything I have ever seen. Now, if you read the novella, Cabal, which is very close to the Cabal cut of the film, Clive Barker almost describes the monsters impressionistically, minimalistically. He doesn't give you a lot of detail. He wants you to fill in the blanks, and he does that with a lot of his prose, I think. He does that with The Hellbound Heart, which is the book that Hellraiser is based on. He gives you just enough, like a kernel of information about the visuals. And it's funny because I think I'm not a movie producer, but if you're a movie producer or director or whatever, and you read a book and you think it has real potential for adaptability, for being marketable, I think it's one of two things. I think the prose is either so evocative and detailed that you see it all play out right in front of you, like for No Country for Old Men, for instance. I heard that the Coen brothers, they didn't really write a script, that they essentially just had the book open, Cormac McCarthy's book, and one of them read it out loud and the other kind of transcribed it and just added the most minimalistic action possible. They didn't have to do a lot because it was all there in the page. And then on the other hand, you have Clive Barker's writing, which is intentionally a little bit more vague, and so I think it gives the filmmaker's imagination more room to wander. So I think it's like two schools of thought when you think about adapting film. Now in this case, obviously Clive Barker adapted it himself and directed it, so a little bit different, but you get what I'm saying. It's really cool to read the book and then see how the monsters are visually represented on the screen, because in the book they really don't go into that many of the specific monsters. There's a couple main characters. There's Narcisse, who is this actor. Once again, I'm trying not to describe violence too much on the show, but he has these little hooks in his thumbs, and he wants to put on a new face, so he, does some stuff to his face and does that. So that's him. He's in the book. There's Rachel, who is a woman who can turn into smoke, and she's in the book also. Her daughter, Babette. They don't really go into Babette's powers necessarily, but like many of the monsters, we know that she can't go in the sun. So when Boone's girlfriend Lori goes looking for him, she finds this dying, almost cat-like creature in the sun and moves it inside, and it transforms into Babette, looking like a human child. She's in the book. There's Peloquin, who I mentioned, who, according to his backstory in the Nightbreed Chronicles and also the comic books that came out, there was a series in the 90s, then a series in the 2010s, both of which had a similar narrative for him. He's almost this, like, Lothario. I'm hesitant to call him a vampire because he doesn't look like that. He has this kind of purple or magenta skin and either dreadlocks or tentacles coming from his head. And he's similar to a vampire or a werewolf in that he can summon a beast inside him and then transform. So he never looks human, but normally he just has the kind of dreads in the skin. And when the beast comes out, he gets these big teeth and his nose kind of spreads out and his face just kind of expands in general. He's in the book, but is described almost like a lizard creature. Once again, not a lot of detail. In the movie, we really see him drawn out. He's the one who bites Boone and essentially inducts him into the breed, the Nightbreed. There's SLAYsmr, who is the leader of the monsters in Midian. He doesn't really get many details in the book. In the movie, though, he's played by the same guy who plays Pinhead in the Hellraiser movies. He has these 3 little slits on each cheek that actually open to become eyes. It's pretty cool. But yeah, outside of that, I'm trying to think if I'm missing any other monsters. Those are the only ones specifically named in the book. In the movie, though, oh man, do we get so many other cool ones. I talked about Shuna Sassy, who's the porcupine woman, who can actually thrash her body and shoot poisonous quills out. It's pretty cool. The makeup is excellent. There's Leroy Gom, who, once again, I know a lot of their backstories because I've read the Nightbreed Chronicles and the comic books. He was a circus performer, and he has these 2 almost like snakes or eels that come out of his belly and coil around his head, and they each have an eye in the center of 3 talons. Sorry, my voice keeps raising as I'm talking about these monsters because I get really excited when I talk about Nightbreed. And obviously you can imagine how a lot of these powers get put to pretty gruesome use once the humans attack Midian, though, with the monsters. My personal favorite monster in all of Nightbreed is Lude, who essentially just looks like a devil. He's he literally looks like a devil, and has this really colorful shirt, and he's kind of best friends with Leroy Gom, and they take their revenge out on the cops, the Calgary cops, and the militia that get sent after them. Once again, pretty gruesomely. I've just always liked the way Lude looks, and it's all prosthetics. I don't think there's a ton of computer-generated imagery in this movie. It was before, I think it was before Terminator 2, after The Abyss, though, but what I'm trying to say is that it was pre-Jurassic Park, so we weren't in the age of film yet where we were doing a lot of these effects with CGI. There are a few superimposed animations that you can see in the movie. It's like something like a fireball or whatever else is animated, but the monsters themselves are mostly just really cool prosthetics, and Lude just looks great. He's got these almost like 2 little pincers on his chin that look like a beard, and these devil horns, and he's just really cool. He's not even in the movie that much. I just think he's awesome. There's Kinski, who is hanging out with Peloquin when they first meet Boone, and Kinski is a really cool backstory, which once again they don't go into in the movie, but they do go into in the comics and the Nightbreed Chronicles. I'm probably gonna get the story a little bit wrong, but I think Kinski, when he was alive, was in love with a woman who did not like his physical appearance. She thought he was not attractive, so he went to some kind of witch or sorcerer, I can't remember, but he took a potion, and the potion was supposed to make him look like, I think whatever he wanted to look like, or whatever he would look at next. But before he could find a suitable thing to look at, he looked at the crescent moon, and so his face elongated into it looks like a crescent moon. Super cool. Kinski's Kinski is pretty awesome. There's Onaka, who doesn't really have anything physically about him to make him look like a monster, but he's got a necklace of seven bird heads on, and a lot of really cool tattoos on his body. He meets a pretty grisly death, unfortunately. There's Scorch, who, once again, we only see Scorch for a few shots, but we get this awesome backstory and just description of him in the Nightbreed Chronicles. He just looks like he has flames tattooed on his body and kind of an elongated dome head. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that we get in the Nightbreed Chronicles. Oh, there's her name is spelled chocolate, but without an E, so is it chocolat? I don't know, like the French movie. She's this kind of scaly woman who lays a giant egg that gives birth to a human baby. She has a really cool backstory in the comics. Anyway, I could go on and on. I feel like we're almost done with the episode, and I've mostly just described monsters to you, which maybe that's your bag. I don't know. So thinking about the monsters in Nightbreed, it's funny because, like I said, they are the good guys. The thesis of the movie is very much that humans are the real monsters. But what I really like is that they don't make the monsters inherently noble or like they're, I know I used the word superheroes earlier, but they're not like Supermen or Superwomen or even all that palatable, if that makes sense. They're still allowed to, like, we see why they were outcast, right? Pelican, for instance, he still likes to kill. He's still sadistic. He just tries to direct that energy at who he thinks deserves it, which in his opinion are humans. He thinks like all humans deserve that. And then you have gentler monsters like Kinski and Onaka. So I guess what I'm saying is that despite them all living in the same place, the monsters in the film are never viewed as being of one species or one race, right? They're not viewed as some kind of monolith. They're viewed as having individual morals. Some of them kind of teeter that line between hero and villain. Some of them don't seem scary at all. I think, though, what separates them from humans is that the monsters just want to be left alone until Boone comes along. There's no, they're not trying to interfere with our world. They know they can't exist in our world, so that's why they get driven underground. So it's interesting to have this whole system of monsters with varying morals, but with a common goal, and a goal that should be easy to adhere to, right? If you're a human, you think, okay, we're just gonna leave those things alone, but of course we can't as humans. As soon as we learn that they're different, we want to go after them, which is kind of the point in the movie, right? Oh, there are the Berserkers, which are they're the most savage monsters of all in Nightbreed. They get kept beneath in this kind of dungeon below, and they are so untamable that they only get released when the humans have attacked Midian and the chips are down and they need kind of a Hail Mary. Boone decides to release the Berserkers. So I guess if they were left to their own devices, they probably would just roam the countryside and kill humans. But you get what I'm saying about the monsters' varying interests and aesthetics. Like I said, some of them are like Kinski and Shunasasi are almost enchanting looking. They're majestic, they're beautiful in their own way. Then you have ones like Leroy Gom, who are just kind of repulsive and freaky, and I think that's part of the point too, that this world both seems hypnotic but also kind of brutal. It's a world not meant for humans, I think, is another point of the movie. But yeah, when it came out, it didn't do that well, and then eventually this Cabal cut came out and you got to see a lot more of this really wonderful world that Clive Barker has created. I always wondered if he was going to do some kind of sequel to it as the movie's gotten more and more popular as time has gone on. And the endings of the two films are different. The two cuts, spoiler alert, don't listen if you haven't seen either one, but in the theatrical version, the monsters, what's left of them, manage to escape Midian, and Boone kind of keeps them in a farmhouse while he goes to find a new home for them. And then in the Cabal cut, which this is more how the novel ends, the monsters escape. They're in the farmhouse, but Boone isn't there. He's with Lori, his girlfriend, who wants him to come back to the human world, but he refuses. And then she asks if he'll bite her so she can become a monster, and he refuses. He says, I don't want that life or that world for you. So then she actually injures herself mortally, so he has to bite her. It's like she kind of forces him to do it so they can be together forever. It's kind of this really beautiful ending, and so she becomes one of the Nightbreed as well. And then we end with the monsters waiting for Boone, who's their savior, to find them a new home. The other big difference is in the original theatrical ending, Decker, David Cronenberg, he gets killed by Boone, but then gets resurrected. It just gets resurrected up. It's too convoluted to go into here. So either way, there's I think great sequel potential for both of those. If you go with the ending where Decker survives, he suddenly gets resurrected. You suddenly have a new foe, or a foe that the Nightbreed have to deal with again as they find a new home. And then if you go with the ending that's closer to the book, we also have sequel potential, with them finding a new home and just existing in the world. I guess what I'm saying is I think Clive Barker has constructed this meticulous universe, and I would really love to see him get to use it a little bit more, especially since by this point critical opinion of the movie has improved and there's a fan base for it. I feel like he could do what he wants to do with the movie without a bunch of studio interference, but we'll see. I know he has we have the Candyman remake / sequel, reboot / sequel coming out, which is also based on a Clive Barker story. I'm sure there's a Hellraiser reboot in the works somewhere. So hey, why not a Nightbreed one, right? That's my personal favorite of his. He said that he wanted to set out to make the Star Wars of monster movies. I don't know if I would necessarily call it that, although you know what I would compare it to? Like the cantina scene in Star Wars, or the scene in Jabba the Hutt's palace. I feel like this is kind of a feature-length version of that. It's just all these cool creatures kind of in the background of this very human story. Also, connecting to Star Wars, I think it's the same artist. I could be wrong. For Midian, there's a great matte painting of the cemetery. So Midian's in a cemetery, but when you see it, like the wide shot of it, it's just kind of the gates, and then a very obviously a matte painting behind it, which I love. That's such like an 80s, 90s thing, but I think matte paintings are so cool in film, and I think it was the same artist who did them for both Nightbreed and Star Wars. I could be wrong. Once again, I need to turn to the old trusty computer a little bit more. So yeah, that's Nightbreed. Once again, I know I talked about a lot of different monsters on this episode, but I can't help myself. I just think it's such a cool world that Clive Barker has created, and also a horror movie that takes place in Canada. There aren't a lot of those. Once again, never been to Calgary, but the movie makes me want to go there, and to Midian, although I don't think they would accept me because I'm human, and humans suck sometimes. I'm just kidding. Humans are great. But we do a lot of bad things and cause damage to the world, so I agree with the movie's point. If you haven't seen Nightbreed, I would argue it's probably the least famous of the movies I've covered so far. Definitely do yourself a favor and seek it out. I think it was, I want to say it was on Amazon or Netflix, and I rewatched it at the beginning of quarantine. I watched the Cabal cut. I always watch Nightbreed. I watch like once a year, but you should definitely seek it out. It's definitely a different kind of horror movie. Like I said, not even scary. It's more visually arresting, I think. Although the stuff with Decker, it still freaks me out. The murders of his they show are pretty brutal. But yeah, definitely seek it out. And once again, if there's a specific movie you'd like to see me cover, please let me know in the comments, or reach out to me on Twitter, wherever. I respond really easily. Thank you so much again for tuning in. It's been really, really fun talking to you all about horror movies and hopefully giving you a little bit of relaxation as well. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy and engaged. And even if you're not, that's okay too. We're allowed to feel upset right now. It's a weird time. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you next week.